next talk, still on this basically computational technical front, is by Sébastien Christian, who joins from University of French Polynesia. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me. Well, so let's talk here about generating grammar learning material for second language learner of endangered languages. Why would you do that? As you know, if the language is endangered, that means the youngest generation is not speaking it anymore or not enough. And so most of the speakers, or future speakers, will have to learn it as a second language. So you need this language learning material. Explicit grammar is needed. So you need this kind of material to teach a second language, well supported, and there's consensus around it. And it's grammar learning material in the second language, but also in the first language. Right? You need to have both to progress as much as possible and as fast as possible. And as you know too, the development of this grammatical learning material for endangered languages is not keeping pace at all with the rate of language extension. So this is where DIG4EL has its roots. The objective, so starting from language speakers on one side, people who are speaking this language, and we want to generate grammar learning material for this language on the other side. How do we do that today? Well, you know it, a bunch of researchers would write papers, academic papers for a while, years usually, and at some point the same people or some others would transform that into a grammar, and can take some more years, and sometimes it's never done. The objectives of DIG4EL is to assist in the creation, not creating, but assisting in the creation of this learning material. For any language, sky is the limit, we'll see, by a speaker with good linguistic ability. So the idea is to create a system that is linguist-free. We should not need a lot of linguists in the middle to create the material, but a language teacher, someone who knows the language and who knows how to talk about it, how to think about it, but doesn't have to know all the lexicon we've seen this morning. Within 2 weeks, that's the objective, and respecting all the best ethical and data safety practices. So of course, fair care, the EU AI Act, and everything that's talking about how we respect the language of indigenous people. Existing today, as you may know, when we talk about grammar generation, most of the automation comes from corpora that are annotated. Can be gloss, right? IGT, can be tree banks, etc. So that means someone has to do it. Or very large corpus, of course, we don't have that with endangered languages. Ballpark number, roughly, if you have less than 1 million pairs of sentences, you are a very low resource language, from a meta framework, for example. Annotating corpus, well, we don't have time for that, not enough people to do that. And large corpus, we don't have that either. You'll have a list there. My presentation will be for download at the end. So how do we do that? How we try to do that? To create a software and a method that assists in corpus creation, that will guess as much of the grammar as possible, then present that to a speaker of the language, the teacher, for example, saying, well, what do you think of that? And the speaker can then adjust and make corrections, and then the machine would format the output depending on who's the audience, what is the L1, etc. So that's DIG4EL. That's an open source software that is available today as a prototype with an existing online presence. We try to replicate, of course, what a linguist would do, what linguists do when they are facing the task of describing a language that is almost undocumented. We start with the idea that, well, this language may have no corpus at all, so we have to start from scratch. So what would they do? They would call it a corpus, of course, then they would begin with their understanding of what grammars are, how they work, add knowledge, reading papers maybe, or digging into GramBank, for example. They would observe, make observation, and after that, try to come up with some thinking process to make inference, right? It's cognitive inferences. Something that's like, well, I saw A and B, and that's usually when there's A and B, there's C. But when there's C, sometimes there's D and E, and when there's A, there's not F a lot of the time, etc. You know, this thing we do without even thinking about it. So the idea is to replicate this process. So that's how DIG4EL works. First, corpus creation. We use the method of conversational questionnaires from Alexandre François here. The idea is to have a method that aims at collecting idiomatic, contextualized, meaningful sentences in the target language, while eliciting predictable grammatical features. Once we have that, even with a small corpus, we can do a lot because we know what's in there and it's designed to have a lot of things we need. An example of a pen and paper, CQ, and now the example of how it is now in DIG4EL. We call that augmented transcription because basically what's happening is that you are at some point in the dialogue and someone will say, oh, I can't find it, so you ask your speaker to tell you how it's done. In this case, in Quechua, Manam Talinichu. And then you ask little more things, not to try to tell you what morpheme goes with what meaning, but more, oh, there's this idea, for example, in this sentence of finding. In which word is this finding thing, etc. And this they can do pretty easily. Then what we do is each of this sentence is has a representation as some kind of universal meaning graph. We hope, we make the assumption that in this sentence, whatever the language, there's the idea of finding something, for example. The idea of being able to do something, and someone being able, and this someone should be the person talking, etc. So the system creates a graph-based meaning representation that will represent the concepts and how they are connected. Once we have all that, we can actually start inferring things. So the inferences themselves, we use Bayesian networks. Well, we talked about that a few times already. Bayesian networks, as you know, it's a model when you have probabilities and dependencies between things. So I have an example here. The weather can be sunny or not sunny with some probability. Your mood can be good or bad. Outdoor fun, more or less. And work, good or bad. So, examples from my own personal life, of course. Good mood, well, good weather, good mood. Right? So we have a dependency between weather and mood. Good mood, good work. But good weather, more fun. And more fun, less work. But more fun, better mood, better work. So this is a typical causal system, right? This is a Bayesian network, and you can, if you work out the dependencies in there and some probabilities and numbers, you can actually connect the weather with work. The issue with grammar, as with life most of the time, is that we have loops, and this breaks the system at some point. It's not as easy when you have a loop to try to find out how we're in the arrow there. That means, well, good mood, good work, good mood. So it's kind of a self system. And the same thing, bad mood, bad work, etc. Back to grammar. This is how things work. So we have this kind of initial knowledge that comes from two well-known databases, VAS and GramBank. For the system, we define grammar as all the values of all the parameters in VAS and GramBank. This gives us statistics. For example, we'll be talking about word order. For example, well, 7% of the world languages are verb, subject, object based statistics. But we also can work out conditional probabilities. If I know something, I should have more information about something else. So example here, so this is a screenshot of the software at some point. I took the example of the order of numeral and noun. So for example, if a language says 3 fish, well, 65% chance the language says this fish. If the language says fish 3, then 99% chance it says fish swimming, for example, and fish big and fish this one, with different probabilities. And you can imagine that if I know that, then I know that way more than before. And if I know that way more than before, then I know something else way more than before. So you have this kind of chain reaction, right, of probabilities in this network. Then the software has automated agents, so basically a little software module that can go in the corpus and evaluate things. In the example of a word order here, for example, in this sentence in Alapa, the software would say, oh, this sentence is verb, subject, object. And with that, the software can update its belief, saying, oh, initially I believed that VSO was only a 7% chance, but now that I've seen that 5 times, it's more than 99%. Right? So observations update beliefs. Once you have that, initial knowledge, observations, now you have a network of parameters with beliefs about their values, and they start talking to each other. That's what we call the belief propagation. And in this case, because it's a loopy graph, we call that loopy belief propagation. Same situation as a group of people. They each know something about an event, the same event, but they know a little something. And now they have to find a consensus of what this event was. So they start texting each other. Right? And if everything goes well, at some point they will reach some kind of consensus. So this is what the software does. This is the representation we have in the software, in this case of the 15 parameters in VALS related to canonical word order. The output is a belief table. So the output of the system would be, okay, in this case, the 15 parameters, they each have a value, a preferred value with an origin. Sometimes it's observed. There's a winner, so in this case, in Lapa, verb, subject, object, with a confidence level, right? And you can see that sometimes we have confidence, sometimes we're not. Does this work? So the first test we've done, the one that's well documented now, is about this word orders. We have these 15 parameters in VALS, and the software can easily observe 7 of these, so we have 8 to guess. And so we add the software to guess the 8 for the 116 languages in VALS that have this parameters well documented. The result is this one. Basically, for half the languages, software has been correct 7 times out of 8. The mean at 6, but it's not a normal distribution. And whatever we do, things can go wrong. And so we always have outliers where something is not defined correctly for this bunch of languages. The results are presented to people, the expert, the language teacher. Any of these results can be corrected. So of course the teacher would look at that and say, oh, yeah, you're right, this is good. Oh no, you say that non-adjective is always non-adjective. Actually, I think there's no dominant order, for example. So everything can be modified by the expert user. Once we're there, we just have to generate a document. So that the formatting piece. You can choose to get a raw output without any additional formatting, either as a JSON, so basically something to be used by another software, or a very simple Word document on which you would find your categories, and for each parameter, the main value, and all the examples that would exist in relation with this parameter. The step that you can take further is to use a combination of large language models to format even further, and to also leverage another kind of output we have, which is some kind of what I call a pseudo gloss. So it's not a nice gloss, but it's all information we have about each of the sentences in the corpus packaged in a format that the LLM can absorb. So in this case, you have this page where you say, okay, I can ask a question to the language, or a question about the grammar, or I can use default questions. You can choose what kind of document you want, is a grammar lesson or a description. what is L1? So you can choose a first language among the first languages the LLM know well, right? It has to be some kind of a mainstream language. And then the audience, from high school beginners to linguists. So I will show you some examples of outputs. Always still on the Rapa language because it's not documented in VAS or Grambling, so it's kind of starting fresh with no backing from existing data. And I ask a question that is, how do you ask a question? And I did not even check with Jack if the content was all right. But that's the thing, is the output is a Word document that is designed to be edited by the teacher, right? It's an assistant to creating this lesson. So here, for example, it's in French because we say they speak French, and it's compared to French, and you see that at the beginning, it's kind of talking about how we ask a question in French, saying, well, in French, we can do this subject-verb inversion, or we can use imperative words, etc. And then you would have, oh, in Rapa, this is how it works. And here, the same output. So I will show you. I think I can do that. Okay. So this is the French high school student version. And you will see that you have this kind of initial blurb, and then you would have examples. Of course, all the examples are coming from the corpus, right? Nothing is invented. That's one of the big things with LLM. You know, we have to prevent them from hallucinating and pulling things from other sources. So we try to constrain them as much as possible with the English here, and then you would have a little blur about each example. If we look at the linguist version, so in this case, I say, okay, it's English linguist. I call that polished because, for example, we just have a sentence, an explication, and you will see that here we have a more complex wording and language saying in situ or close initial positions, etc. Examples still just having this here, the explanatory sentence. And then you can also have the raw pseudogloss that's here. That would deserve some more explanation, but you will find your way through it, I think, with all the words here, and then if they have been associated or not with the concept, and what is the internal relational particularization. Back here. So coming next, there's still a lot to do. Checking how it works on as many languages as possible and grammar topics as possible. Enabling the injection of any existing documentation with appropriate credits. So basically, if there's papers about this language, we should be able to absorb them and use them for the reasoning part. And then enabling the use of any existing monolingual or monolingual corpus. If we have a corpus in this language, that would be a shame not to use it. So it's something additional that we need to create in the upcoming 6 months. And then the last piece, that's pretty much on the way, is being able to use local LLMs. So a combination of language models on your machine or on the servers we use at the UPF, for example, to make sure that we control even more everything, and there's no bits of languages sent away to a black box. You'll have here some more additional watching and reading with the full paper and all the explanations, references, and that's it. You can download the presentation with the QR code, and on Thursday between 3:30 and 4:30, but if you come at 4, it's okay. You can stop by with your computer and come and try the software. It's online, it's working, and make sure that, I want to make sure that you don't feel shy going online, going in there and see what, you can't break anything, so play with it, right?